Now, in recent weeks, Saudi Arabia has launched an offensive against anti-regime activists, arresting many and sentencing some to years in jail. The total number of political prisoners has now surpassed 40,000, according to some reports. The crackdown has even forced a member of the ruling family to defect. RT Arabic spoke exclusively to Saudi Prince Khaled Bin Farhan Al-Saud, who accuses the monarchy of corruption and silencing all voices of dissent.
The government is obviously scared of the Arab revolutions, and they've responded as they usually do, by resorting to oppression, violence, arbitrary law, and arrest. The easiest thing they can do is deprive you of your salary or fire you altogether. The ruling regime is not guided by justice, and this is especially true of the Ministry of Interior. There is no independent judiciary, as both police and the prosecutor's office are accountable to the Interior Ministry. The ministry's officials investigate crimes, they call them crimes, related to freedom of speech. So they fabricate evidence, don't allow people to have attorneys. Things like that happen all over the place. They even put people under arrest for an indefinite amount of time. Even if a court rules to release such a criminal, the Ministry of Interior keeps him in prison, even though there is a court order to release him. There have even been killings. And as for the external opposition, Saudi intelligence forces find these people abroad. There is no safety inside or outside the country.
Could you describe these people who oppose the royal family, and what are their goals?
Opposition used to demand wider people's representation in governing bodies, more rights and freedoms. But the authorities reacted with violence and persecution instead of a dialogue. Now the opposition wants this regime gone.
We both know that despite numerous human rights violations in Saudi Arabia, your country seldom faces criticism from the West, and from the United States in particular. When senior US officials meet with their Saudi counterparts, do you think they convey any critical comments from Washington vis-à-vis Riyadh?
The White House certainly does maintain a long-standing alliance with the leaders of Saudi Arabia, cemented by common interests in the Middle East. To that end, there are classified contacts between Riyadh and the U.S. administration. In recent time, they have been employed to step up the government-administered reforms. But those reforms are not driven by the elite's desire to empower the people of the kingdom. Instead, they are merely urged by reforms that the regime might fall unless it reforms itself. Oppression is widespread in Saudi Arabia. There is no free speech, no freedom of expression. Corruption is rampant in all areas. From low-level bureaucrats to high-ranking officials, every civil servant is very skillful in using bribes in their operations.
Well, the Saudi regime's crackdown remains largely ignored by the international community, leaving it free to advise other regional powers on how to move towards democracy. RT's Lindsay France takes a look at the country's own dire record of dealing with its internal democrats.
As Saudi Arabia violently squashes the voice of any opposition, we see it sitting front and center in discussions of the democratic transition of power within other countries, such as Syria. On the one hand, it reportedly ships arms to the opposition in Syria. On the other hand, peaceful opposition in Saudi Arabia is answered with prison sentences, torture, even death for people who voiced their own opinion. In fact, in October 2012, Amnesty International called on the Saudi authorities to stop using excessive force against pro-democracy protesters. Here are just a few examples from this year alone. On June 17th, Mikhlif al-Shamari was convicted of sowing discord and other offenses through writings and exposure of human rights abuses. He got 5 years in prison. June 24th, 7 men were convicted of inciting protests, illegal gatherings, and breaking allegiance with the king, mostly by joining Facebook pages and posting messages. They each got between 5 and 10 years in prison. Then we've got, on the same day, website editor Raif Badawi, convicted of insulting Islam and authorities through his website and during television interviews. He was sentenced to 7 years in prison and 600 lashes. In these conditions, anyone with something substantial to say about the government, society, or religion wouldn't be blamed for keeping a low profile. And this is where the man being called the Saudi Assange comes in. No one knows who he is, what he looks like, or where he lives. His prolific tweets denouncing the ruling family as corrupt and enriching themselves from government coffers have earned him over 1 million followers. He is known only as Mujtahid. I spoke with him over Google Chat to find out why he stays in hiding, because it's not for safety. I asked him why he remains anonymous. He said, ironically, anonymity boosts his credibility and encourages people to follow him and talk about his stories without worrying. I asked if this meant that people could pay less attention to his biography and more attention to his message. He pointed out the regime can destroy your credibility easily and deter people from dealing with you if your identity is public.